Good evening and welcome to the Live Lab. This is our 18th annual integrated lecture and concert, which is the culmination of our research conference that we held all day today. So some of you I know are at the conference, and some of you are here just for the evening, but welcome to everyone. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. So McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. And across cultures, music can bring people together, and through our programs, research and concerts at the MIM and the Live Lab, we're committed to cross-cultural understanding through music. So at our conference during the day, a number of people asked if they could have a tour of the Live Lab, and we didn't have time during the day, so I'm going to actually, before we get started with our wonderful program tonight, I'm just going to take a couple minutes and describe the Live Lab for those who are out of town, and it might be your first time here. So the Live Lab is a wonderful concert hall, as you'll hear tonight, but it's also a research facility, and we have a lot of equipment systems in here by which we can measure how people respond to music and how the brain and physiology react to music and other stimuli. So one of the systems we have is EEG, or electroencephalography. So we can measure that, we can measure heart rate, we can measure muscle responses, breathing, and skin responses. And what's really unique about the Live Lab is we can do that in individual musicians, but we can also do it in groups of musicians playing together. And in fact, we can do it in whole audiences. And this is just a picture of a recent study we had here. It was one of our concert series, and we had two of the winners of the Canadian Chopin piano competition play here. So it was wonderful music, and we had 20 of our audience members wearing EEG so we could measure their brainwaves continuously through the concert. We also measured their heart rate and their galvanic skin responses. So some of our concerts have research components, and if you want to participate, we're very happy to have lots of people participating, so just let us know at the Live Lab and we'll sign you up. We also have that piano there is a beautiful grand piano, Yamaha grand piano, but it's also a disc clavier piano, which means that we can record the timing and velocity of every key press during a performance. And then the piano can actually play them back where it actually hits the strings, and so you get the actual sound pretty much identically as what happened in the concert. So at that study I was just describing, we recorded the pianists, and then afterwards we played it to people so that they could continuously rate throughout the musical pieces how expressive they were, how happy they were, the emotional valence, and how arousing they were. And then we can look at how that relates to how their brains are processing the music. So that's just an example of some of the things we can do with this equipment. We also have live stream capacity, so we have real-time response tablets. You can see here, so we have audience members can make responses that actually affect performances, and we can have these wonderful interactions between audience members and performers. Obviously, we have sound and lighting and recording. And as I said, during the pandemic, we really improved our live stream capacity. So, in fact, all of the concerts we're having this year are hybrid. So you are here in person, but I also welcome our audience who is viewing this event online. We also have motion capture, and you can see these cameras around here that are around the audience and around the stage. We put little markers on people, and we can, from the different camera angles, make three-dimensional models of how people moved. So we can do this, say, in all the members of a string quartet to see how do they communicate, how do they play using their movements and their bodies. We can do it in a whole audience, and we've done this a number of times now, looked at how whole audiences respond to music. You might have heard we had a paper published recently in which we showed that when we presented very low frequency sounds, they're actually too low to hear, and people aren't necessarily even consciously aware of when we had those speakers on and off, that in fact people moved more when the speakers, these low frequencies were present in the sound, that too low to hear, but in the sound signal, than when they're not. And so this has been on pretty much every major media outlet, Canada, the US, and around the world. So you might have come across that study that was done recently here in the Live Lab. This is just a little rendition of each one of those series of dots represents a person's head in the audience as they're listening. So that's the kind of data we can get from whole audiences, and we can analyze how people affect each other when they're in the audience moving together, and see why people like to be experiencing music with other people in an audience situation. And finally, we have an active acoustic system, and I'll just demonstrate this. You might think that you're in a nice acoustic space here, and you are. But in fact, it's not the natural acoustic of this room. So I'm going to actually, Honey, can you just clap your hands? So you can hear there's a little bit of reverberation. Okay, so now I turned it off. You can probably hear the difference already in my voice. And Honey, clap. Okay, so what we've done is we've turned off this system. I'm now going to turn it back on to something that has more reverberation. So, Honey, if you can clap again. Hear the difference? And I can even make it sound like a cathedral if you clap again. Right? So pretty impressive. How do we do it? Well, there's about 28. I'm just going to turn this down a little bit. It's not good for understanding speech when there's too much reverberation. So there's 28 microphones hanging down from the ceiling. We have 76 loudspeakers in here. And so in real time, the microphones pick up whatever sounds are happening, and then they calculate the echoes that should be played through all 76 loudspeakers to give the reverberation that you just heard. What this means is we can also put sounds into the environment. So I'm just going to play you a couple of demos. So for research, this is really interesting and cool because we can see how people, say with hearing loss, can locate sounds. We can also see how people are distracted by sounds, as we do in some of our hearing aid work. So here's another demo. Yeah, so this is in a restaurant environment. And as you get older, you may have noticed that you have more trouble hearing in noisy environments, like in a restaurant. And so some of our work on hearing loss and hearing aids, we can use the live lab and the acoustics in here to see how people can perform and how we can improve hearing aid algorithms for them to hear better in those situations. And then finally, I'm just going to demo to you how great the sound system is, just with a short little excerpt.
Told you that I know
stop it, but we have other things to do tonight. But you can hear that it's hard to find a better sound system anywhere than what we have here. Okay, so with that introduction, we do many things on Live Lab besides research. We have the concert series, so please come out to our next concerts. We have the Iris Trio coming in February. We have a research concert with Nesquik in March. And Sunday afternoon in April, we have the amazing jazz and cabaret singer, Adi Braun. So look at our website. I think it's in your programs as well, and make sure you don't miss those. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for our concert series. So this year, in memory of Carl Turkstra, the Insight Foundation for the Arts is proud to present our 2022-23 Live Lab Hybrid Concert Series. So these concerts are live streamed as well as in person. And we also gratefully acknowledge support from McMaster Faculty of Science, the Department of Psychology, Neuroscience and Behavior, and GER Audio. Okay, so now we can actually move to the main reason why you came here. And we have an amazing speaker tonight, Dr. Miriam Lenz. She's an assistant professor at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, where she co-directs the Vanderbilt Music Cognition Lab. Her research is well funded by the U.S. National Institutes of Health, National Institute for Deafness and Communication Disorders, and the National Endowment for the Arts. So her research focuses on social communication in young children with and without autism, and she's particularly interested in music-based interventions to support optimal development and family well-being. She's a very dynamic speaker, so I know you're going to enjoy her. And as you can see on stage here, we have the Hamilton All-Star Jazz Band, and they're going to illustrate Miriam's talk. So this group was formed in 1984 by Dr. Russ Weil, and he's developed, and the group has developed into the premier amateur big band organization in Canada. Features youth up to 25 years of age, and currently it's directed by Alan Gaumont. They've won numerous awards and performed at prestigious jazz festivals and events around the world. So we're honored to have them join us this evening. Thank you very much. And so, finally, please welcome Dr. Miriam Lenz to the stage.
Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Laurel, for that wonderful introduction. Let me know if I'm giving you mic feedback, since we know this room can do anything. Just, it's not me, it's the room, right? You always, when you're giving a talk, you're like, oh goodness, who am I following? And it's interesting, I've never followed a room before. It's like a different kind of set of circumstances, But I'm going to do my best. So as Dr. Trainer mentioned, my name is Miriam Lenz. I am an assistant professor and a clinical psychologist at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm really excited to be able to share with you today about some of the work that we've been doing in our lab, about rhythm and music and social engagement in children with autism. And I'm really excited to be here with the All-Star Jazz Band. I will try to not talk so much because we want to have them play a lot, and I know we're all really looking forward to that, but I think it's going to be a really fun evening. So what am I going to talk about? So the talk's going to occur in two different parts. So our first part is going to be focusing on rhythm and timing and social interaction. And I'm going to admit this is the more technical part. So bear with me throughout it, and you'll be rewarded with the jazz band's examples and amazing songs. And then in the second part of the talk, we will begin to talk about more intervention approaches and really supporting children and caregivers. And we have a audience interaction opportunity. So you should have seen in your program already a QR code, which you could scan and contribute to that. We've got it up on stage as well. Okay, so the other thing I would be remiss if I didn't mention, I have a wonderful team of people that I work with, and so I just wanted to highlight some of the people whose work I'm going to be discussing as I sort of give some examples in the first part of the talk, and the second part of the talk. Whenever you do anything with interventions, it takes a village, so that's why there's several people on there. All right, So we're going to start by talking about rhythm. Can I see maybe a show of hands? Who was at the talks earlier today? Okay. Mix. Great. So for those of you who were at the talks earlier today, if a little bit of this is a bit of review, just think of it as repetition, which is good for learning. And for those of you who are new, if you have any questions, just ask somebody who raised their hands because they kind of got a primer already. All right. So social communication makes use of predictable rhythmic behaviors. So what are some examples of the way we use rhythm and timing in social communication? Well, you can think about our speech rhythms. So my speech that I'm doing right now has a rhythm to it, and you're tracking that as you listen. Well, hopefully you're tracking. I don't know, I guess. You can also think about the way we coordinate our gestures, our facial expressions, our movements with our speech, and these things are all very tightly linked together to make a really clear communicative signal. You can also think about the back and forth rhythm of conversation, and I know we're going to have some beautiful examples of that with the jazz band. So before the jazz band plays, just in case any of you don't believe me, here's a little musical example.
Mr. Walker, extraordinarily busy. I just wanted to ask about the chocolate. The lifetime supply of chocolate for Charlie. When does he get it?
He doesn't.
Why not?
Because he broke the rules.
What rule? We didn't see any rules, did we, Charlie?
Wrong, sir. Wrong. Under Section 37B of the contract signed by him, it states...
All right, rhythm, okay? So there's rhythm and timing in our speech and in the way we coordinate our social interactions with each other. So one place where rhythm is really, really important is in infancy and the way we communicate with infants. We call this infant-directed communication, and the way we move and speak and our expressions and our affective behaviors between a caregiver and the infant are actually highly rhythmic in nature. And we know that our success in coordinating these types of rhythmic interactions has positive later outcomes in life for things like language, cognition, and attachment. So that's a little bit of sort of background about social information. But we're going to be talking also today a lot about autism. So autism is a common neurodevelopmental disorder. Our current prevalence rates are about 1 in 44. And often when people think about autism, people might think about differences or reduced social interaction or challenges with engaging in types of social behaviors. But also we know that a lot of these behaviors have to do with how we're coordinating our timing. So things like coordinating our eye gaze, coordinating our vocalization, coordinating our smiles with each other, attending to the same things at the same time. So timing is involved in a lot of these social behaviors. But despite these challenges, we also know that many children with autism have maintained preferences for musical and rhythmic stimuli. And for example, they still prefer that really rhythmic infant-directed communication I was describing over adult-directed communication, which is kind of a little more boring, to be honest. Okay, so one way that we can study rhythm and timing is by looking at the timing of people's vocalizations. So from the very first months of life, caregivers adjust the rhythm and timing of their vocalizations to best communicate with their infants. So caregivers are constantly adapting because they want to communicate to support what their infant needs. Infants, they got some skills, they don't got that many skills, right? So caregivers really need to scaffold that and really support them along. And what we can think about these vocal interactions, how we talk, and we can think about the rhythm and the timing and the frequency of both an individual's vocalizations as well as their relationship with each other. And I don't know if you guys can all see, but what it says down there is basically that this occurs over multiple time scales. So what's really amazing is our speech and our vocal interactions are unfolding, they're occurring on the time scales of milliseconds, how we're producing specific speech sounds, to the time scales of when we have syllables, to the time scales of when we're producing words, so we're getting into seconds, and then how we're interacting with each other, so tens of seconds. And all of those things, how those build up to each other, are what we refer to as temporal structure. So let's do some examples. So as I was just saying, our vocalizations unfold in time, and they unfold over lots of different time scales. And this is how these time scales build up in each other, is what we consider hierarchical or nested temporal structure. And so this is a little complicated. We're gonna give you some examples. So if you have a sound that has no temporal structure, there's sort of no structure, that would be something like white noise, something like a type sound, right? There's no temporal structure in it. And on these graphs, just to orient you, that's that kind of gray line at the bottom. You can see as the time scale goes along, there is absolutely no increase. So I think the jazz band's going to play us an example. Yeah? All right. All right, so that was like a big, we were all so ready. And then that was like a Weird Al Yankovic moment. I love that. All right, so yes, we can have a sound with no temporal structure at all. On the contrast, we can have a sound that has tons and tons of hierarchical structure, something that has what we call metrical organization all the way up through all the different time scales. And so if you think about our orange line, and you can see it because it's the one that's shooting up super high above the jazz band's head, that's actually something like a thunderstorm or a symphony. So I think the jazz band's going to give us a little example. Awesome. We're building things up here. All right, so we have no structure. We have tons of structure across all time scales. And then, if you can see the blue line, which is just peeking over the jazz band's head, so you can see it's not as high as the symphony, we have something like conversation and speech, which has a lot of structure, but after a while, at certain time scales, that nestedness or that hierarchical nature of the structure begins to fall off. And what's so cool is this is great because you can just see the relevant parts above their heads, and we didn't even rehearse this. The blue, I have color issues. The green there, as you can see where the blue arrow is conversation. And in red, which you can see nicely maps onto a conversation, is jazz. So jazz has a lot of similarities to the way we're conversing and having these types of vocal interactions with each other. So now that we've given you little teasers, and I've made the jazz band play two extremes, I wasn't meaning to set you all up, I apologize about that. They're going to play us some real jazz or some real musical conversations. Well, thank you. That was amazing. And I just loved it. I could have just stood up here and had a long conversation with someone, just showing you how, we have structure over time scales. We also get really flexible, but I think jazz illustrates it, even better. So thank you all so much for sharing that with us. So you can see that, again, there's structure, right? It has structure, but it gets really flexible as well. And that's what happens in our spoken conversations too. So we were really interested in this idea of understanding the sort of temporal structure of vocal interactions in parent-child dyads, because as I mentioned before, parents are often adapting their speech and their interactions based on the needs of their child. And also, in an interaction, both partners, right, the parent and the child, are playing a role and are contributing to the vocal signal, the acoustics that are unfolding over the course of the vocal interaction. So in one study, we looked at this temporal structure, this hierarchical temporal structure, in autistic and non-autistic toddlers and their parents during play interactions. So they just could play with toys, and we could record them, and we could say, okay, how are these interactions structured? Is there something similar, or is there something different going on? So we have kind of three options. I don't have buzzers for people to, buzz in with what they think it might be. So it could be that in our children with autism and their parents, it could be that we have greater structure, right? They're more symphony-like, or if you think of the prior example, they played a little bit, more marching band than free jazz, right? It could be that they're the same. We could have that kind of jazz-like interactions that we were just hearing illustrated, or it could be even reduced, sort of, more white noise-like, less structure. So let's see a show of hands. Do we think the parent-child dyads of children with autism, compared to dyads without autism, are going to have greater temporal structure? Who thinks that? Okay. Who thinks they'll have the same? Is nobody voting? Who thinks they'll have reduced? Okay, we have some abstentions. I'm not grading you. Okay. But you'll know if you voted or not, and you'll know so you can, adapt. All right, so it seemed like people more thought that there would be sort of reduced structure in those interactions. So what do we see? So we compared children with autism in the blue to toddlers who were matched on developmental levels. So these toddlers had a sort of similar levels of nonverbal skills, but had more advanced language skills. And actually what you can see on your left in the blue, that we have greater scores in the toddlers with autism. And if you see that looking over on those graphs that look like the ones before, you can see that the blue line increases more than the purple line. We also then compared toddlers with autism to younger children, but children who had similar language skills. And you can see actually, well, maybe you can't, maybe you can, I don't know, that the toddlers with autism continued to have increased structure compared in those interactions compared to toddlers without autism. All right. And the really interesting thing about this is you can see that those two lines are diverging really at those longer timescales that are on tens of seconds. So early on, there's no difference. When we're talking about timescales that are really short, like vocal production, there's no difference. But at the long-term timescales, that's where we're seeing those differences. And those are the timescales that reflect social interaction. So if we kind of take that, kind of look over that, we could say, okay, so vocal interaction dynamics are more rigidly organized across timescales. They have more structure across all of those timescales, and particularly those longer timescales, which reflect what we might call social pragmatics, but that's sort of social interaction components. So why is this? Well, this is not only good or not only bad, but it's sort of reflecting some differences. So one possibility is that it's because the parents are using more infant-directed speech. They're sort of using this different type of speech style in order to capture their child's attention, because for the children with autism, they may be less focused on their parent during that interaction. And so parents may be using a speech style, and I didn't give you the hint before, that infant-directed speech has more of that structure than adult-directed speech. But another reason why we're probably seeing this is because the dyads with the children with autism are being sort of less adaptive or less flexible to those changing interactional demands. So one example is they have that kind of less balanced back and forth turn taking, right? So there's sort of reduced social reciprocity happening. And so as a result, we're seeing sort of differences in the temporal structure that's emerging from these interactions. So what's really cool about this technique is it requires no hand coding. So for anybody who has done like laborious hand coding of like every single thing somebody says, you don't have to do that at all. It's all automated. And again, it's something that we're not necessarily even aware of, but it just unconsciously comes out in regards to how we structure our interaction. So timing is really, really important, and we can see using this method that toddlers with and without autism, in their interactions with their parents, there are differences in this sort of temporal structure of the interactions. So that's speech. But another really important signal that we have is infant-directed singing. So infant-directed singing is a universal form of multimodal rhythmic social interaction. I want to highlight, and for those of you who heard me talk about it earlier, apologies, but I'm going to talk about it again. Infant-directed singing is not just sound, it's a very multimodal act. So there's facial expressions, there's gestures, there's body movements, and these are all synchronized to the rhythmic structure of the singing. And infant-directed singing serves to capture and maintain attention of infants, as well as modulate their arousal levels, and also their caregivers. So if anyone has an infant, it's good for you too to sing, and maybe if you have a dog, you can sing to them also. It's just good, yeah. Or to your neighbor, to the person you meet on the street. Maybe you'll meet somebody new. I'm from Nashville. There are a lot of people singing on the streets. They mostly have guitar cases open in front of them, and they want you to put in a couple of dollars, but still, they're singing, and it's wonderful. Okay, so we talked about how speech can be structured in parent-child interactions and how it can be structured differently in the interactions of parents of children with and without autism. So now we wanted to look a little bit about how singing can structure and support infant caregiver interactions. So singing has a predictable rhythmic structure. And we know that this sort of predictability is really important for helping people coordinate their behaviors with each other. And when we coordinate our behaviors and align them in time, that leads to various forms of pro-social behavior, more liking of other people, more helping of other people. A lot of that work has been done right here. I don't know if you guys, after people groove to something in the Live Lab, if you how many of them are patting each other on the back afterwards or putting donations in the coffers. I'm not sure, but it leads to a lot of pro-social behavior. So we wanted to really look at how singing might support this infant caregiver interaction, and we were particularly important about how singing to infants could, what we call entrain or time, infants' attention to a caregiver's eyes. So why eyes? Well, eye looking is an incredibly important form of social interaction, and it emerges very early in development. It emerges in infancy. We also know that eye looking is something that is often reduced, both in a mentioned amount and timing, in children with autism. And so we wanted to start by looking at, well, how do infants, non-autistic infants, entrain and pay attention to the eyes of other people? And does singing support this? And we did this by using eye tracking paradigms because infants, you can't make them do anything. They're just going to do what they want to do. So we had them watch videos, which is pretty engaging for infants. And they watched videos of people singing, and we just saw where they looked. So just to give you guys, this will not be as good as the jazz band. They set a high standard, but this is what we showed the infants. Oh, maybe this is not what we showed the infants. Let's try it again.
Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. All right,
so all infants need to do is watch this video, and we look for every frame, every moment of the video, where are they looking? And we're particularly interested, when are they looking at the singer's eyes? So the way we study this, so basically you can see on the top row, you just have still frames of the video, and then you can sort of choose which language you like to read in, but you can think about the lyrics of the song, you have the musical notation, you have the sound waveform there, and then we've sort of fit a sine wave or these tick marks to kind of show you, okay, the beats, the metrical structure, what you all were tapping your foot to when you were listening to that amazing jazz song before. We wanted to look at, okay, at those beats, at those moments of important, rhythmic important information, how are infants looking at the caregiver's eyes? So I'm going to show you a series of graphs. And what I just want you to kind of keep in mind for extreme, so how do we measure this? So if you think of those dark middle, yeah, good. Okay, so if this is the beat of the singing, what we were all tapping our foot to before, and then if there's no relationship between looking at the eyes and the beat of the singing, you're gonna see something that looks like this, okay? Which is like nothing, right? You're like, what am I looking at? That's, yeah, you can't see anything. Okay, but if at the beats of the singing, infants are increasing their likelihood of looking at the eyes of the singer, you're gonna see something that looks like this. So you see this nice big response here that infants are doing a behavior that is time-locked to the beats of the singing. So what do we see? So we studied this at 2 different age points first because we wanted to get a proof of concept. So in 2-month infants are first showing a clear sign of actively engaging with others in a meaningful, social, interactive way. So we wanted to see, okay, do we see this type of behavior as early as 2 months of age? And the answer is yes, we do. So you can see here at the beats of the singing, you have this increased probability of infant eye looking. So infants are more likely to be looking at the eyes, time-locked to the beats of the singing. I was really emphasizing that, sorry. And then we looked at 6-month infants, because at 6 month, infants are already really experienced in face-to-face play. They're doing lots of musical games. They're also producing lots of rhythmic communicative behaviors of their own, like babbling. And you can see here, time locked to the beat, and to a much greater degree, infants are increasing their eye looking, time locked to the beat. So this suggests that the rhythmic structure of singing, with its predictable beats, is entraining infants' attention, and it's entraining their attention to a really important social information, the singer's eyes, which are going to be so important for social bonding, directing attention, understanding emotional states. The eyes are a window into what a person is feeling and thinking. But of course, infants are going to be looking at the eyes for no reason. There must be something happening. So we wanted to say, well, what information are caregivers providing? What are singers doing at the beat that infants are looking at? And so we looked at a number of different caregiver behaviors. And we see that, at the beat of the singing, and I know this is small, caregivers are opening up their eyes really wide, and they're doing this really nice wide-eyed positive affect. They're less likely to have neutral affect, which makes sense because you can't be positive and neutral at the same time. That would be quite conflicting. They're more likely to still, so they're having low motion in their eye area, so they're becoming kind of like a stable source for the infants to look at. And they're actually inhibit their blinking, and because it's amazing to think about, but when you blink, you cut off information to the visual world around you, and you cut off information for other people to see your eyes. And so the caregivers are actually less likely to blink at the beats as well, which means their eyes are nice and big and available. So what this means is that time-locked to, so infants are aligning their eye looking, time-locked to the rhythmic beat of infant-directed singing. And this is aligning with important moments of caregiver social communication behavior, like opening up their eyes really wide. I'm not going to show the analyses here, but I will tell you we've done follow-up analyses, and really importantly, it's not only due to those social cues, so we can look at, do infants only look because the caregivers are, opening up their eyes really wide? They do not. They will only look if the caregivers, they only have this increased likelihood of looking if the caregivers are opening up their eyes really wide, and it's happening at a rhythmic beat. It's happening at a really important moment. So as a result, infants and caregivers are having these entrained social interactions, right? The rhythm is supporting infants in looking at the caregiver's eyes, these really important moments, and looking at the right time. So this is going to help to optimize infant-caregiver meaningful engagement, and it also is providing the infants with really key opportunities for social learning, because infants are attending more at the same moments when caregivers are providing really important social information. So we were really excited about that. It was really neat for us to be able to see this. So we wanted to push that a little bit. So in singing, as we said, interactions are predictable. It has a predictable rhythmic structure. We could tap our feet to it. But we looked at, our singing wasn't a metronome. It was natural. It had some fluctuations to the rhythmic structure, but it was still highly predictable. For those of you who, like to read these types of plots, that's what this is basically describing, but you could kind of look at the sine wave and see like, yeah, the rhythm is happening pretty predictably, and in these plots, which basically are just showing distributions of the timing of the beats, of the intervals, they're pretty tightly clustered around 0. So then we wanted to say, well, what happens if we really reduce the predictability of the stimuli by making it experimentally unpredictable? So I think we're going to have a little bit of a jazz example here to give us an example of some highly rhythmic and some not so predictable rhythmic information. Is that, you still on for that? Yeah. So maybe you guys can tie, clapping along to the beat as we get some jazz going here. Thank you. I think when the jazz band got asked to play, they didn't know I was going to ask them to play so many things that sounded bad. But it's your musicianship that allows you to play amongst both extremes, right? So to be able to kind of really cover the space, right? So yeah, so we started off with a nice predictable rhythm, and everyone was great. We had some tapping along, and then it became, I would say, less and then unpredictable. And we kind of all tried at first, and then we kind of gave up because we were like, I have no idea where the beat is. So that's kind of like the stimuli we made the infants watch and the toddlers watch. So you heard, Mary Had a Little Lamb played well, right, with a nice predictable beat. But here's an example of what the toddlers might see where we've ablated that rhythmic structure, where it's no longer predictable.
Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow.
Yeah, so I don't think you're going to sing that to your child at home. Certainly not going to do it on purpose, at least, yeah. Maybe that's like every time you're singing and you're like stepping over their Legos or something like that, and that's how you end up singing. I could kind of maybe envision that. Yeah, so we showed, now in this follow-up study, we showed toddlers with and without autism, both original videos where it had that nice predictable rhythmic structure, and then videos like this where the structure was perturbed and it was rather disturbing. Okay, so what did we see? I'm not going to make you watch that again, I promise. Okay. So on the top, we have our typically developing toddlers. On the bottom, we have our toddlers with autism. And right again, that center line here is our beat. And in our original singing, our unjittered singing, our toddlers who are typically developing are really good. They're increasing their eye looking, right timed, nicely time aligned with the beat of the singing. They're actually anticipating a little bit, which suggests they're anticipating and predicting, so that's really cool. And then when we look at our toddlers with autism, you can actually see, although it is a smaller effect because there's more variability, they are also entraining their eye looking. So even though we know that toddlers with autism may have reduced eye looking, and we know that they may have difficulties coordinating the timing of their eye looking, in this situation of natural, predictable, infant-directed singing, both toddlers with and without autism are able to time align and train their eye looking to the beats of the singing so that they're nicely attending to the singer's eyes, remember, at those nice moments of social information. So what happens when we jitter the singing so it's not so nice? Well, it Oh, it got tiny, but that's okay. Okay, it reduces in both toddlers with and without autism. But as you can see in the toddlers without autism, yeah, we still have a pretty nice signal happening at the beat. So even though it's reduced, they're still able to time align their eye looking to those moments of importance, of social importance. But as you can see in the toddlers with autism, they're really struggling with it, and they're sort of no longer really able to effectively predict and time their eye looking to be nicely timed to the, the beats, now that the beats are unpredictable. Okay. So if we put this together, it's such that rhythm really structures social behavior, such as eye contact, in both typically developing and autistic toddlers. And that sensitivity to rhythmic predictability may contribute to social development in autism. And this is a little schematic from some colleagues of mine, Warren Jones and Ami Klin, which are just kind of pointing to this idea that, right, social development, a key word in that here is development. It's unfolding. And so if there are differences in some sort of behavior that's important for those types of social interactions, one of the reasons we might see kind of heterogeneity or differences across children as well as changes over time is because you need to be able to use those skills to support your social interactions as those interactions are unfolding and as they're becoming increasingly advanced social interactions. So, we're getting close to our intermission time, so after the intermission, we're gonna kind of push this forward and ask, well, can rhythm and timing sensitivity be part of intervention development in autism? So if you think about some of the studies that we've talked about the importance of timing and the importance of rhythm in structuring social interactions in both typical development and in autism. We've talked about how it impacts both and can be reflected in our vocal behaviors as well as in our nonverbal behaviors like eye contact. And so if we want to look to support social communication behaviors, can we use this information about the temporal structure, about rhythmic predictability to support children and design interventions that are really taking advantage of these key components? So I want to give you all one more reminder for our audience participation opportunity. So please, if you have not already, make sure you use the QR code. And I think because we just made the jazz band play some arrhythmic information, the jazz band is now, before our intermission, is going to give us a nice jazz piece to play with our predictabilities, play with our rhythmic structure, and kind of integrate all of the things we've been hearing and thinking about through some music. we're going to take a 15-minute intermission unless someone who works here corrects me. So thank you all for your attention thus far. I want to give a huge thanks to the jazz band so far who has been playing along with my requests for both, music of all different types, I guess we could say. We've played with the rules a bit. And I hope you all have a good quick break and then can join us back as we talk about interventions. Thank you. All right, welcome back to our second half of our talk. So we left off talking about rhythm and timing and intervention development, and the idea that both developmental and social communication skills can impact and are be reflected in rhythm and timing. When we think about interventions in autism, and I'm talking right now about interventions for young children with autism, toddlers age, preschool age, we often think about what are the active ingredients of our interventions. And I'm not talking about a musical intervention, I'm just talking about our standard sort of best practice interventions. And this is a model of one of those types of interventions. This is from the Early Social Interaction Project. But a lot of the types of interventions that have been developed that are some of our best practices have these sort of layer cake or pyramid models where we're going to start by developing the skills at the base of the pyramid, at the bottom of the model. And I just want to highlight, right, because this isn't coming from a music perspective at all, but if you see down here, if you can, where's my mouse? The very first thing you want to do is put in supports for a common agenda, and that's going to include using motivating activities. You want the child to have a productive role in that activity. You want it to be a predictable activity. You want to build in predictability. You want to follow the child's attentional focus, and you want to be able to position yourself face to the child to really engage them. And you want to develop these skills, which then allow you to develop more advanced skills for sort of back and forth interactions, and then kind of continue to develop more and more advanced and nuanced social interactions. So when I'm thinking about behaviors that are motivating, and have productive roles and can follow child's leads and are predictable, maybe if we're remembering our rhythmic predictability, we can think, well, how does music play fit into these types of interactions? And so it turns out when we think about these evidence-based interventions, which are called naturalistic developmental behavioral interventions, it's a very long name, they contain many elements that musical play can make a really nice intersection with. So musical play can be a really great platform to practice these types of evidence-based strategies for children with autism to increase social interaction. So things like they're predictable, right? Musical play is predictable. We were all tapping our hands to the beats when we were having the regular musical structure. So you know what's gonna happen. It makes it easier to time your behaviors. For many individuals, musical play is very reinforcing. It can be very motivating and rewarding and engaging to enjoy. Music play can also be very emotional, and this is important for a couple of reasons. One reason is that we learn better when we're in good states of emotion regulation or arousal regulation. And then the second is, if you're having trouble with your emotion regulation, having an activity that you really enjoy can be a really helpful way to work on that activity. Musical play naturally involves shared attention between a caregiver and a child, and we gave that examples before using those eye tracking studies, how caregivers and children are coordinating their attention. So when you do a musical play, you're following the child's lead, you're sort of socially interacting with them, and then also musical play is a natural form of social play. And so when we think about these types of interventions, we really want to embed them in a child's everyday activities. So, what's really neat about this to me is that these elements of musical play, their predictability, their reinforcement, their emotion regulation, their shared attention, the social play, those elements are not just the case for children with autism, they're also the case for their parents. And more of our interventions are really focused on how can we support parents in supporting their children. So if we can think about maybe using some of these types of approaches, maybe this would be a good way to teach parents ways they can support their children. Okay, so here's sort of one example of something like this. So we gave children and their parents toys to play with, and they could play with any toys and play in any way. And we see that during musical play, in that light green, parents are more likely to be physically, non-verbally responding to their child. So doing things like imitating their child's play, physically supporting their child's play, versus when they're engaged in non-musical play. So that's really important. In a study we did, we had parents and children read books together, and the books were either musical books, like Wheels on the Bus, or wordless picture books. And you can see that parents made more eye gaze to their child during the song books, right? So parents are sharing their attention, they're being available for their child more during these song books, right, with their familiar and predictable structures than they are during the wordless picture books. And also really exciting, if you can see, the parents' eye gaze towards their child was also associated with children's eye gaze towards the task and towards their child, but towards their parent, but only in the songbook activity, not in the picture book activity. So it's kind of a little bit of a manifestation of some of the experimental work we were showing before, where these song activities are helping provide a structure to support this parent-child interaction. Okay, so when we take those different parts, we can think about, well, how can we combine music and these NDBIs, or naturalistic developmental behavioral interventions, to best support families? And so we're, in our lab and in other labs as well, we're doing this in a number of ways. Sometimes we use clinician-administered therapies. Sometimes we are teaching parents the strategies to support their child's social engagement and communication through musical games and songs. So what can parents be doing? We can teach parents how to incorporate songs and musical activities into everyday routines, so that it's not just like during your therapy time that you're doing it, but how can we embed the structures provided by music into everyday interactions and daily living activities. And just really importantly, I want to highlight that a lot of the programs that I'm going to discuss are really collaborations from many people, from psychologists, music therapists, speech-language pathologists, and of course feedback from families as well. So one form of NDBI is something called reciprocal imitation training. And reciprocal imitation training uses, developed by Brooke Ingersoll at Michigan State University, and it uses a number of evidence-based principles to support children in developing their social imitation skills and in supporting various types of social communication and interaction. So we've developed a music-enhanced version of reciprocal imitation training, in which we use all the same principles of reciprocal imitation training, but we turn that nozzle up on the rhythmicity, the musicality, the songness of them, to try to really take advantage of all of the types of ways that music and these social communication interventions are interacting with each other. So some of these strategies that we use are something called contingent imitation. So whenever the child is doing something, the therapist or the parent, if they're the ones doing it, is going to be imitating what the child is doing, because this is a way of building social engagement, building relatedness, showing that you're interested in what the child's doing. And it also helps to set the stage for sort of back and forth social interactions, because I'm going to imitate you, and then over time I'm going to model things and have you imitate me, so we can begin to get some of those back and forth social interactions. We also want to do things like describing a child's play, so that we're giving them words and information about the activities that they're doing right now. So I'm going to play a little video example. This is from a music therapist that we work with, and she's going to be showing these sort of contingent imitation and describing play skills.
Xylophone. Xylophone, that's right! Xylophone! Really dumb. Play a xylophone today. Play a xylophone. Play your xylophone today. Play today. Play, play, play.
All right, so as you can see, the music therapist, this is Lauren Book, who we're working with here, and she's imitating what the child's doing. She's providing models for the child, and then you're getting a little bit of this sort of back and forth interaction using this musical play. So this is just one example of the way that we can use musical structures and musical games to build these skills in. So we have clinicians administer it. We also will teach parents how to do these types of strategies. And what's great about that is because then parents can be working with their child every day and in all different interactions. So this is an example. It's not going to be quite as musical as the music therapist doing it, but I think you'll hear some musicality in the parent's speech, and you're just going to see the parent imitating and sort of doing this back and forth interaction with the child.
Sleeping on the ground, sleeping on the ground. Oh, sleeping on the ground, getting up and sleeping on the ground and getting up and sleeping on the ground, getting up and down. Whoa, up and down, sleeping on the ground.
Right? So the parent is building this like beautiful shared experience together with the child. The child is loving the parent following their lead, right? The child's like, oh, cool, mom's really interested in what I'm doing, so I'm going to keep doing this. And mom is describing it with what we would call sung speech. She's, sort of enhanced the sort of musicality of her vocalizations. She's building in those patterns, and they're getting that call and response back and forth. So obviously, we use call and response in our everyday conversations. We use this kind of call and response. It's something we're teaching and modeling in our interventions with children to help understand that back and forth of the social interaction. And then, of course, call and response is a big part of jazz. So I think we're going to turn it back over to the jazz band to liven things up with some call and response music for us. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So we have call and response, we have social interaction, we have these built into our therapies and our strategies that we use. But we've been sort of focusing on kind of, individual children or individual families. But of course, music making also often really happens as part of a group. So in another area of work that we've designed, this is called Serenade, which is an integrated psychoeducational parent-child music class program. And this brings together families of young children with and without autism to participate in a shared music class experience. Families learn songs, but they also are learning parenting strategies like following your child's lead and describing their play and how to do this through musical games, imitating them and building that into musical games to practice doing these strategies and extending beyond the musical play as well. And so parents have weekly goals that they practice with their child to sort of use music to support social interaction and positive behavior. And it's also an opportunity for parent discussion and parent connection. So I'm going to just play a little example from a music class. This is just from the Hello song, and this is with Adam Summers, who's a wonderful music therapist that we have worked with as well. And you're going to see we're working on getting a child to say hello or wave hello.
Ready, say hello. Hello, Brody. Hello, Brody. Hello, Brody. Can you wave hello today?
Yeah, it feels good, right? Like it's so you can I'm not going to make us all sing hello to each other right now, but I don't know, test me, maybe I will, right? But they're having this shared social experience, and they're working on goals. Given time, I'm not going to have us turn the house lights up and call on you, but be ready because I might, right? But some of the things you might notice, right? So they're having this shared experience, all the families and the children together. And there's a structure to it, right? The music has provided familiarity and routine and a structure for what to do. And the child's, waving and learning how to do it. A couple of things that are really cool, right? So he's waving because he's been, taught this is how we say hello, and he's learning, he's imitating things that are happening in the class. When he stands up at the end, that's not something we require, right? We don't put them on the spot, like they don't have to give a lecture. But the reason he's actually doing that is because one of the peer children in the class loves when people sing hello to him. And he gets up and he stands in the center of the circle and waves at everybody. He thinks it's really fun when everyone gives him all that attention. And so the child actually stands up at the end because he's observed that other child is standing up, and so he's imitating him, he's copying him. But another really nice thing, though, I like about this video is if you notice is at the end, right, when he did that really nice wave, the whole room cheered, right? And that's going to make the child feel really good. It can be lots of positive attention. But it's also potentially going to make the parents feel really good, right? Because the parents they've been working really hard with their child, and the whole class is sort of really celebrating this success. So, one of the things when we think about these types of experiences is really, we can think about, okay, can these types of parent-child music classes, support specific skills in the parent or specific skills in the child? But I think it's really important to think about how we fit within our broader community. And sometimes our goals are about sort of broader community engagement experiences because that's incredibly valuable for building community and building connections. And sure enough, just as some qualitative data, when we ask families to report on sort of, what was their experience like in doing this type of integrated parent-child music class activity, we have the families of children with autism reporting in the black bars and the families of the peer children in gray bars. And, these are the themes that come out: the importance of having a really positive and supportive activity, the importance of having community connections and building autism awareness and acceptance across families, opportunities to connect within their family, opportunities to learn parenting strategies, and then noticing behaviors and changes in their child, often which of course are related to the musical behaviors and things that we were doing. in addition to getting this sort of qualitative experience, we also have done what's called ecological momentary assessment, when you have parents make ratings in the moment about how they're feeling. And when we look on the level of single classes, from like the start to end of a single class, we see that there are increases in parent positive affect, decreases in parent negative affect, and increases in a sense of social connection, particularly to the other members of the class. On the level of the class, we don't actually see changes in terms of sense of connection to their child, because those tend to be pretty high already. But if we look over the program for the parents of the autistic children, we see increases in parents' sort of sense of connection to their child over the time course of participating in this program. So these parent-child sort of music interaction experiences can be a really positive opportunity to support children, but also to support parents. So we actually started this program before the pandemic, and then the pandemic, couldn't all get together and make music together, and that was, of course, very sad. So we have some resources online. I guess I should have done disclosures. My disclosures are I had a role in helping create these, but I make no money off of them, so I'm not really sure where that leaves us for disclosures. But if you are interested in checking out some of the type of music that we use, if you're a parent or know a parent of a young child and you're looking for some music, if you're looking for some music-based parenting strategies, we have a YouTube channel that has various videos on them, both of like single songs as well as kind of little mini mock music classes, as well as streaming. You can get some of that music, so I'll share that there. Okay, so just sort of keeping our eye on the time. In addition to this idea of having this parent-child music class to support parents and their parenting strategies and support parents and children, we've thought some of the themes that were coming out of this were not just what this program was doing to support the children, but really what the parents were getting out of it, and parents having this positive, supportive community activity. So this is really important because it turns out that parents of children with autism actually report higher levels of parenting stress, higher levels of mental health difficulties like depression, reduced well-being, and this can be for a variety of factors, but has been related to the plethora of parenting responsibilities, the child's needs, managing services, financial issues, social activities and support. So we really wanted to say, okay, how can we best support, not just sort of the children and support the parents with the children, but maybe we need to also really support the parents directly themselves. And over the, I would say really, last 10 years, 5 to 10 years, maybe 5 years, so 5 to 10 years, there's really been an increase in sort of focus thinking about, okay, in autism research and in autism clinical services, really, how can we really best support children and support their parents? Because supporting parent well-being is going to be really important, both for the parents as well as for downstream effects on their child. So one way that we have done this, including by incorporating music, is by developing a mindfulness-based stress reduction form of therapy that is focused on using music and songwriting. So if you're awake, let's see. Okay. I hear some awkward laughter and people like nudging their neighbors like, wake up. Okay. Who here is familiar with mindfulness? Okay. All right. Nice. Okay. So mindfulness, right, is not about being calm, which is what we often think about it. It's not about yoga. It's not about relaxation. Mindfulness is about paying attention. It's about being present, paying attention in the current moment without judgment. And so what we have done is we have developed a mindful songwriting program because there's been many studies that have been shown that mindfulness-based strategies can be, hey, just for all of you, it's important for like everybody, it turns out it can be helpful, but it's been a really good therapeutic strategy and approach for parents and caregivers of children with autism and other developmental disabilities. So in our mindful songwriting program, it's done over telehealth. We work with a wonderful music therapist, Kate Kelly, and parents learn mindfulness-based principles, but they apply those mindfulness-based principles to doing mindfulness activities with music and also through writing songs. The parents generally don't have, prior songwriting experience. They're, not necessarily even musicians, but they're really learning these mindfulness skills and working with Kate, working with the music therapist to learn and apply these skills. So they write 2 songs applying their mindfulness principles. One song that is focused on the mindful awareness of their child, and one song that is using our mindfulness principle of loving kindness and applying it to themselves. So we've done 2 small trials with this, and compared to a control group who's not getting, any intervention, we do indeed see that parents who participate in our mindful songwriting intervention are having reductions in stress, reductions in depressive symptoms, and increases in well-being. But what I'm going to do today is just play you kind of a short lyrics video to give you an example of some of the types of songs that they're writing. And I hope that you can listen to them and think about the mindfulness experiences that are being reflected. So think about those ideas of paying attention, and think about those ideas of loving kindness, which is kind of providing compassion, to yourself and understanding that. So this is sort of, in their own words.
With your ferocious love, the grass is greener, the sea so much bluer, the sunset glows redder. Wherever you are, everything is brighter, it's better because of you. Because of you. The journey had you stumbling, just fighting things that shouldn't be so hard. Picked yourself up time and time again, and you've taken every step. You're getting to the place you need to be, 'cause you're still here. I'm gonna keep on being me. It's not for the others. I'm gonna keep on being me. And just breathe. I'm gonna keep on being me. I'm gonna see all the colors. I'm gonna keep on being me. And just breathe. Sometimes you feel the mountain's too steep to climb. One step, one day, one moment at a time. But look at you, you've come so far. Through the peaks and valleys, you've learned to love where you are.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to our parents for sharing their songs, and to Kate for performing them. And I hope, in listening to sort of the parents' own words, you can kind of, you could kind of be mindful of thinking how they're reflecting on their child, themselves, and their journey, and really paying attention to what's happening in this moment, and what that can mean for their journey moving forward. So, with that in mind, we thought it would be fun, you may or may not agree, to do a little bit of a group songwriting experience. And so the really good news for you guys is I will not be singing, but we have a wonderful music therapist and grad student, Rachel Finnerty, here at McMaster, and she is going to share with us. So for those of you who did the QR code, we have a selection of some people's responses, you can begin to see some of the gratitudes people are in. Gratitude is, of course, one of the principles of mindfulness, because you can be paying attention and noticing something you can be grateful for in this moment. And Rachel's going to share a little bit more about music therapy and songwriting.
So first, is this working? Yeah. So first, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of providing an example. It's so exciting hearing your research anyways, but then to hear the incorporation of music therapy is, obviously I'm very biased, that it's really awesome. And so in regards to when Miriam was mentioning the music therapist and the parents are writing songs, but the parents don't need to have any background. Clients in music therapy don't have any background in music necessarily. So how on earth do they write a song? So for example, the music therapist might ask the client, is it going to have more of like this kind of a sound? Or is it more like this? Like, is it more upbeat? Is it more slow? And so the music therapist takes the direction of the client in order to develop the melody. What is it going to sound like and the feel of the music? And then in regards to the lyrics, they might brainstorm together, just like we all brainstorm some thoughts around gratitude. And then based on those words, would create the lyrics of the song and work collaboratively until the client has what they feel is a good representation. And now, otherwise, they could also, instead of creating a brand new melody, use a melody that already exists. I'm tall. And so, for example, I'm just going to do this. So you might be familiar with this, for example. Thank you. I'm so grateful. Thank you. So are you familiar with this melody? Ba-dum, ba-dum, da-da-dum, ba-dum, da-dum, da-dum, da-da-dum. Are you familiar with this? All right. So this would be an example of a familiar melody. And then we take the lyrics, all right, so some of the main themes here, and we put it into a song. So what about? It seems we all agree music is necessary. In the same way, we're grateful for family. Thanks for friendships and health. God's presence is wealth, like a loving hug on a cold, snowy evening. So thank you for sharing your gratitude. Thank you for keeping an attitude of gratitude. Thank you. Oh, what else? Sorry. What else did you put on? What else did you put on there? Feeling grateful for the field of music, cog, for the research that's allowed us to learn and grow. So thank you for sharing your gratitude. So thank you for having an attitude of gratitude. So that's just a little example of bringing in the different gratitudes that you shared this evening with an already pre-composed melody. Thank you.
And thank you, Rachel, for sharing your talent with us. I am very grateful for that, and for giving sort of a little flavor of songwriting. And thank you to all in the audience who contributed to our gratitude log. We couldn't cut and paste all of them, so I really do appreciate everybody who has participated and maybe trying something a little bit new, a little bit different. And you know, that's what we ask parents to do. And what's interesting is that many of the parents report about opportunities to process their emotions through their songs and learning mindfulness principles and applying mindfulness principles, which is amazing. We also see, however, that many parents, in response to the experience of participating in the program, talk about confidence and a sense of accomplishment and trying something new, and how that can be just such a confidence building activity. And then they also talk about this being an opportunity to really share, not just to share with the therapist, but they have their songs that are really personalized to them that they then, it's not required, but they often choose to share with family members, or friends, or community members, via social media and sort of parenting groups. And so it's a mindfulness practice, but it also becomes a way to connect with others as well. If you're interested in mindfulness and music-based versions of mindfulness, we have an example there of a loving kindness song meditation. So it's a sung meditation that you can do. It's very calming, so we're not going to do it now because this audience already feels like super chill. I'm just going to assume you're all like really mindfully reflecting at the moment, and it's meaningful and deep and important, and you're just aware. And that's the great thing about mindfulness. It can be something small or big, but it's whatever we're aware of. And then we've just started with, obviously only with parent permission, to be putting example songs written by caregivers and parents up on YouTube, and we'll be building that and sharing more and more. As I mentioned, many of the families or parents are really like to share their songs. They want to have their story told, and I think that's so powerful and important. I am trained as a psychologist, y'all, so I have to kind of come back to those themes. All right, so we've had a little bit of a journey, and my computer didn't want it to end, it froze. Okay. So if we take the first half of the talk, and then we take our second half of our talk, and we kind of put those things together, I think just some kind of final takeaway messages. So music and rhythm and timing are really natural components of social interaction, and that rhythm and music may be a really accessible and engaging platform for supporting both children and families. And then I also just again want to highlight, we need to consider outcomes when we're thinking about interventions that are at the level of the child, the level of the family, and the level of community. And sometimes I think when we're thinking about music interventions for autism in particular, for example, it's a lot of our minds go to, okay, how can we build like this specific social skill, or how can we support this specific behavior? But I hope, from some of these, other examples we've shown that other types of goals like community integration and family well-being are just as worthy of thinking about how we can use music to support children and families. So I want to thank you all for your attention. I want to thank the participants and their families who have given their time to us in doing these different studies. I have a number of funders and collaborators. And then really importantly, I want to thank the Live Lab and Dr. Trainer for inviting me to be here today, and the All-Star Jazz Band for sharing their incredible talents with us. So we're going to end with some music by the jazz band that's really thinking about taking musical pieces. We've talked a little bit about how we can use music and how we can apply it in different ways and maybe think about it in different ways to kind of support children and families. And they're gonna play some music for us that they've adapted from some other sources. And so I think we can just sort of think about this translatability of musical experiences and how it can kind of maybe transcend some of these different silos to really reach many people and many different traditions. So thank you all so much for your time, and thank you to the jazz band.
So I just wanted to give a very special thanks to Miriam, Dr. Miriam Lenz, for a wonderful talk on music and autism. And thank you so much to the Hamilton All-Star Jazz Band. And hope to see everyone at our next concerts. We have Iris Trio, Nesquik, and Audie Braun all coming up after January. So have a great evening, and we'll see you soon.